Welcome everybody to the Broward webinar, Understanding Self and Workplace Transitions. My name is Robert Alness. I am the Director of Philanthropy for the Broward Public Library Foundation, and I am so excited to be putting this on. To tell you a little bit about who we are and what we're doing, I'll tell you a little bit about the Library Foundation. So we are committed to enhancing the collections, programs, services, events, basically everything the library does to the community. We look to expand on that beyond what public funding would normally offer. So always looking to increase the reach and the impact that is made for all of the free resources, which is everything the library does to all of our community. Broward is one of our newest initiatives. It is a young professionals group that was started with the thought of, the library has this great abundance of resources and a reach into, some of the thought leaders in our community, and how do we use that to connect it with the young professionals who are up and coming, who could use the information the most. And we wanted to do it so that it was beyond that of just a socializing or networking group, so that members of our Broward would leave any event or any program knowing a little bit more about the world or themselves, and always coming away from it with something more. So it's been a really great start, and we're very excited to be hosting these webinars as a program of Broward. And on that note, I would like to introduce our Community Engagement Chair for Broward, Camille Camacho. She is also consultant with Thomas International North America, and has so graciously agreed to put this webinar on for us. So thank you so much, and welcome, Camille.
Hi, Robert. Thank you so much for the introduction, and hi to everyone who's watching this. Again, my name is Camille Camacho, and I am a consultant with Thomas International North America. I've been with Thomas for about 3 years now, but I've held a relationship with Thomas dating back to 2015. I really love what I do and what we provide to different organizations across the country, across North America. We'll get into that a bit later. Before we kick off, I just wanted to give a huge shout out to all the men and women on the front lines right now, combating COVID-19 and just supporting us through this crisis. You guys are valued for everything that you do, and your dedication and service is, I think, something that had propelled us to even start this webinar series, because we'd like to, in any way possible, give back to the community at this time. So with that, if you guys have any questions as we go through this webinar, obviously we can't be talking during, but please feel free to give me a shout, give me your feedback, or ask any questions. I will provide my contact information and Robert's contact information at the end of this session. So I'm really hoping I can hear from you all. Now, to get into the fun part, today's purpose is to really just build a foundation for self-awareness within yourself, so that you can promote the best behavioral traits that you exhibit at work and your current work environment, and any behavioral strengths that you take with you as well. And today we're really going to be exploring those work styles using the DISC model, and just giving different examples of different strengths and motivators that you bring to the table at your work environment and at your next opportunity. And we're just going to be talking about the importance of understanding how to manage your behavior through this crisis as well, because I know it's really topsy-turvy for a lot of individuals, including myself. And we're just going to talk about things like remote working, or even potentially preparing yourself for new opportunities. So with that being said, I'd love to just talk to you guys a little bit about who we are at Thomas. So Thomas International is a global specialist in work-based assessments, and they're all user-friendly. So our cloud-based psychometrics system provides objective, unbiased data that accurately identifies people's work behavior, things like learning capability, emotional intelligence, leadership potential. And we've been doing this for over 35 years. So we've really built a massive track record of improving organizations, their leaders, their employees, their most important people. And we do work globally with a wide array. I'm just very lucky to be working with the North American arm. We also have over 300,000 trained users or analysts that use our psychometric assessments across the globe. And our philosophy really is to make sure that we're putting the power in your hands, so that you get the expertise and you get to work with the technology and effectively impact your business and your people through our assessments, but with your touch. This is just a couple of clients that we keep in North America. I figured I'd show this. A lot of these are great organizations that we work with, and it's kind of fun just for people to say, hey, I know that company. Well, we try to impact them any way possible through their people as well, and that we're really proud of that. So the meat and potatoes of what we do with Psychometrics is all about a scientific approach to uncovering really valuable insight beyond an interview. That's beyond observation, that's just beyond general discussion to help determine insights about a person's specific personality. I mean, it's so interesting that each and every one of us has something ingrained in us that we've learned throughout our lives, and we like to make sure that we highlight that. We highlight that through your work style, through your learning capacity, again, your emotional intelligence, things of that nature, and we're all very concerned with the reliability and the consistency and the accuracy of our assessments to ensure that what we're measuring is what we measure. So our focus really is going to help, again, provide you with the behaviors that you bring to the table as an individual at work, and things like your communication, your natural style, modifications that you're making. And hopefully while you guys are listening in, you're going to be thinking and answering these questions to yourself, like, how do you react under pressure? How are you likely to respond to change and to conflict? Are you a collaborator? Do you like to contribute and be on a team? Are you naturally really inclusive with people at work, or are you more task focused? So just keep all these things in mind as we go through this webinar together. So to understand DISC, we'll need to first focus on the 4 pillars or basic pillars of behavior. So the DISC model comes out of Harvard University, and it's the work of Dr. William Marston, and it was developed back in 1928. It's been refined for the last 50 plus years, but it's the most widely used behavioral assessment model in the world today. Now, it was specifically designed to understand people's work behavior. So we're going to use this as a basis of our discussion and to really understand your behavior and how it's going to help enhance your business interactions and even just personal interactions. So there are 2 axes. The vertical axis is going to focus on behavior, with one being active or externalized, so things that are easy to see in a person, and on the other end is going to be passive behavior. So it's not as easy to see because these individuals are most likely going to be keeping it inside. It's going to be more private and reflective. Now, the horizontal axis is going to focus on the work environment on a whole. So with the left side being more hostile, more unfriendly or challenging, even potentially antagonistic. The right side is going to be found to be favorable and friendly. So some of you are going to find that you enjoy one, some of you are going to enjoy the other, some of you are going to enjoy both. But it's where where these 2 axes come together, we get those 4 distinct behavioral quadrants that are going to exhibit very different and unique behavioral styles. So let's take a closer look at each one of these behavioral styles as well. So I'm going to start with dominance. Now, this is a behavior that is active in a hostile environment, and people with a strong preference in dominance are likely going to be very results focused. They're going to be self-starters, very assertive and direct. Their usual communication style is going to be very telling and directive. I'm sure as we're talking about this right now, some of you guys are thinking, I know exactly who she's talking about and they need to know this. But this telling and directive manner is just a point to reinforce what they're saying. So when you look at the body language, even of this individual on the screen, you can see that she's pointing, you can see that her arms are crossed, but she's leaning back, she's very confident. So try to think about what conclusions you draw from this image as well. You know, like I like to ask the question also, like if we were trapped in a submarine and this woman, the way out, would you consider it positive behavior? Just kind of food for thought. Now, something I should have mentioned earlier is that each of the behaviors I'm going to talk about are actually on a spectrum of behavior, ranging from the high end, which is what we're seeing right now with this woman on the screen exhibiting these dominant behaviors, and then also on the low end of the spectrum. Now, neither are good or bad. It just depends on which behavior is a supporting factor and which is more fundamental in what you bring to the table. So even as this behavior moves away from the high end to the low end of, let's say, low dominance, we're going to find an individual who's going to be more cautious. They're going to be more consultative, more accommodating. And just like you can think of situations where a high D would be great in action, there are some options with low D that are fantastic. Like people with low D are great at coaching. They're great at getting buy-in, dealing with issues in a calm, respectful manner, just helping and supporting different individuals. So I think the most important thing to get out of as we talk through all these behaviors is that we have to embrace all the spectrum of behavior and really focus on which is the one that you have most and how we're going to make the most out of using that behavior for your benefit. Let's move on to high influence. Oh, actually, these are some behavioral cues. Sorry about that. This is a little bit more about the body language that you could see someone exhibiting with these types of behaviors. So someone with high dominance, you can pick them out in the room, again, because it's very externalized behavior. They're most likely going to talk over everyone. They're going to probably want to be the center of attention. They will interrupt. They maintain very strong eye contact, almost intimidating eye contact. And they are someone who is going to definitely want to take control of the situation and speak very quickly and confidently. So keep an eye out for these behavioral cues as you speed read different people while you learn about these behaviors. Now let's move on to influence. So with influence is still an active behavior in a very friendly environment. So they're going to have a focus on people. Now, people with a strong influence behavior are likely to be very positive, very vocal, friendly. They're very emotive, outgoing, and their usual communication style is going to be very chatty, communicative. They're going to want to just make friends, work with and through people on different projects. So with this behavior, I think it's great about motivating enthusiasm, cultivating these different relationships, and they're really going to be selling and persuading people as they go in a very influential manner. Again, very externalized. You're going to know exactly who those influential people are in the room because, again, just like the dominants, they're going to probably want to take up the room, but they're going, hey, how are you? How was your weekend? Tell me a little bit about yourself. I love cats. God knows, right? But as we move away from high influence to low influence, this is where we focus on a change from people to, let's say, tasks and concepts and analysis. So this behavior on the low end is going to be very logical. You might even come off as serious, probing, reflective. They're not going to want to hear about your weekend because when they come into work on a Monday, they're going to be like, hey, Susie, what's due today? I don't want to hear about your brunch antics on Sunday. Let's get to work. So people with that behavior, though, are really great at preparing a budget. They're great at gathering information. They're great at analyzing risks. So every organization needs someone who's going to be able to bring this to the table as well. Here you can see a little bit more of the body language. Again, very verbal. They're happy to share their feelings. They're going to want to get on that go-to meeting or Zoom meeting to talk about, what they learned today. They're going to use their hands a lot. I've already given it away. I'm definitely a high I. And they're going to be really expressive. And they just talk a lot. So sometimes they may need to tone that down depending on who they're working with. Moving into steadiness. Steadiness is a passive behavior in a very friendly environment, and they're going to have a focus on a very steady pace. They're very service-oriented, and they're going to be great team players and great listeners and very persistent and thorough in their work. So their usual communication style is going to be listening because they want to make sure that they are listening attentively and calmly and gathering all the information that they can to make sure that they deliver the best product and support the team to their best capacity. Steadiness is also our pace-based factor. So with the steadiness and pace, they're most likely to be very procedural. They're going to like to finish their work very thoroughly, and they're going to have more of a tempo. Whereas, let's say people with like high I are kind of like fast. You hear me clapping. It's kind of like sporadic. But people with steadiness are going to follow that tempo. They're going to take things slow. They're not going to like to jump from one action to the other because they want to follow that procedure. When we go away from high steadiness into low steadiness, we're going to find that this indicates a change in someone who's going to be more active. They're going to be very restless. They're going to want to have a preference to initiate things and get going, keep moving, handle multiple projects at a time. And this is great with someone who has to manage multiple priorities, or someone who's great at kickstarting projects. They're going to have probably low I, and that's going to be really suitable for the situation. So try to feel out your tempo and see, you know, which end of the spectrum you think you lie with the steadiness. Do you think you're on the high end, or do you think you're on the low end? Finally, just getting down to our last behavior, last but not least. And here's some just behavioral cues of the steadiness. Again, they're going to nod. They're going to show you they're listening. They're going to be very steady. They're unhurried. They're calm. They're going to want to see pictures of your weekend. Just say, oh, that's lovely, you know, because they want to make sure that you feel heard. But again, getting back into compliance, our last behavior. This is a behavior. Now, on the same side as dominance, they are going to thrive in a more hostile and unfriendly situation, but they're also passive and they internalize their behavior. So they're actually the hardest behavior to speed read. With compliance, using this like passive approach, their focus is going to be on policy and to be able to calm the hostile environment. So people with a strong preference for compliance are usually going to be very accurate. They're going to be very precise, very logical. They're probably going to be somewhat of a specialist in their field as well. And they're going to have probably their perfectionistic style, because they're going to focus on that policy and information and make sure that everything is accurately written and composed for themselves. So they're probably also going to write a lot of things down. That's their most preferred communication style, because they need that detail and information to really feel comfortable. Now, when we move away from that policy-oriented high compliance to the low compliance behavior, we're going to find someone who is dramatically firm. They're going to be strong-willed, independent. They might even challenge policy, like policy averse. And this is really going to result in an individual who is going to think outside of the box. They're going to want to be creative, and they're not going to need all the information to get the job done. So with compliance, again, since it's the behavior that's hardest for us to see because it's not externalized, they're probably not going to make a lot of eye contact. They're not going to probably want to catch your gaze because they don't want to get sucked into conversation. They're going to be very systematic. They're probably going to show up to the meeting ahead of time instead of on time. And they're going to prefer a lot of details. So providing details to them in person or beforehand, like in an email before the meeting, hey, Susie, I need you to bring X, Y, Z, and here's what you need to know. They're going to probably prefer that than coming out of the meeting and learning it there and then. So a lot of information to process, and we've looked at these 4 pillars. So I think my question for you guys is to really just take a step back and think about which of these behaviors do you feel, even just on the high end, that you fit into. Take a moment to just think about that. Think about some questions you might want to ask yourself. Even if you want to ask me, write them down, because I'd love to know. I'd love to help you, because behavior isn't simple. You know, humans, we aren't simple. We can try to be simple, but we are a complex being. So understanding who you are and where you ebb and flow within that behavioral spectrum is really important, and understanding how self-aware you're going to be, which is the focus of today, and then you just using your self-awareness to help you communicate and work more effectively with others. So we started this conversation learning about our own behaviors at work and learning about how we're going to modify and manage through our strengths and through these opportunities. But I want to focus now, and Robert, I'm probably going to ask you a question here. Like, after you've learned about all 4 of these behaviors, what do you think, or where do you think you fall in the spectrum of behavior?
You know, listening to you talk about them, I'm in some parts, I'm like, oh yeah, you know, I can see some of me in this and more here, you know, definitely kind of in a general influence. I'm certain I end up with a lot of I. And then when you were first talking about steadiness, I was like, oh, that's probably my other highest one. And then you got to compliance, you know, and it was shows up ahead of time, sends, you know, all the information they need up ahead of time, is really organized with all the data, likes everything to be structured and ready, you know. And I thought immediately back to like our Meta Broward meetings and how I can't go into it without having everyone has a packet and all the information sent ahead of time. I'm going, you know, I didn't think I was compliance at first, but I'm probably a mix of influence and compliance in the most, you know, being that kind of friendly, outgoing, but then also really rigid and structured. I like having a process and a system in place a lot. It's very difficult for me to shake out of it. If I get a bunch of parts that are spread about, it's kind of hard for me to get it organized.
And it's interesting you said that you feel like you fall into two. So oftentimes, like 50% of the population is going to fall in that range where they're going to have two high factors. So they're going to feel that they fall in between. Again, you said influence and compliance, and that's very likely. And only 25% feel that they have all three. The other 25% think that they only have one that they fall into, or are tested and it's proven that they only fall into one. I know I fall into two. And it's fun to just be able to ebb and flow again between those behaviors and understand that, now I totally get it. When we get into our meetings, Robert is so well prepared and we all have folders ready to go with all the notes, all the minutes, and, the agenda, the docket, whatever you want to call it, for what we're going to be talking about that day. And I really appreciate that. I do love the detail, but I also love just like, hey, tell me what I need to know and let's get moving. So I'm glad that you noticed that. But Robert, what about your wife? What about your partner? Like, where do you think that she falls years?
That is almost like a loaded question. It's like, oh,
totally loaded question.
That's your wife for us. And on the internet here. All right. Well, honestly, she's definitely more dominant, I would say, than influence. Okay. She's definitely not as outgoing and friendly as I am, but in any group we've been a part of, she always gravitates towards a leadership role, and she likes to be in control, and she likes to be able to, to provide vision and go like, this is how we really need to align things and get things going in this situation. So I say she's definitely in the dominance. And then, I think she's also compliance. I think she'd also slide somewhere around in there. It's hard to say specifically, but she's definitely organized. For a number of years, she was the director of finance for the roller derby team. So she was in control of all the money and keeping it organized, and was very, all right along that line. So I think that's where she lies in the strongest.
So where do you feel, now that you've told me a little bit about her, and she sounds like a lovely woman, where do you feel like your relationship together, like in working together as a team, where do you feel that you guys have similarities, or how do you guys play off of each other's behavior?
It is most often in the dynamic, I think, that you would probably see between the dominance and the influence. So where she can sometimes come off as, she's very direct, and some people, it ruffles their feathers. And then I can come in and I can kind of smooth things out, and I chum around, let's do this, and, in a friendlier way. But then when I'm in there and I'm not getting anything done because I'm too busy just talking and not giving any direction, she comes in, she's like, okay, well now, here's what we need to do. And people are like, all right, yeah, let's get started. I like this. So that dynamic of being able to work between the personalities of, in getting the things done and being direct about it, but also having that, the soft side to kind of keep people engaged in a friendly manner. I think is where I see it the most.
Yeah. And I think you said it the best yourself, in the fact that I think there is really, it's almost like a dance. You have to let one person lead and the other person follow, but it's a mix of, capitalizing on your unique strengths to make sure that you make the most out of the relationship, and you make whatever obstacle, whatever challenge, whatever next milestone you guys are doing together, you make it work based on each other's strengths. So I think that's what really we're just trying to reinforce today in today's conversation, is even just looking at this behavioral agility, making sure that when not only are we just trying to focus this discussion together today to understand ourselves, but let's try to speed read others. Let's try to make sure that we understand what other people like and what they dislike based on their behaviors, so that when it comes time for us to have conversations or work in a team environment with those people, or even when we're ready to move on to a different role or job opportunity, that we're aware and cognizant of the fact that people are going to have different behaviors to us. And what can we do to make sure that their behavior shine and my behavior shines as well?
I know that you talk about this in a workplace scenario, but I love what you're saying. And I'm going, man, maybe I should look into this just for my family.
I mean, so what we do is specifically work-based, but I mean, think about you and your wife. You guys are a team, and you do work together. I mean, I'm sure that there are definitely things even aside from like a private or like personal life. It's work. Relationships are work. So I definitely think that some of this definitely has some validity when it comes down to your personal life. But then again, there are people that have one specific type of work behavior that they exhibit in their work environment, and it can be completely different at home. And again, that's where this find the reliability and the validity to our assessments and focusing on work behavior are so important. We like to reinforce that, but that's a good question. We can definitely pick up in other conversations. We could talk about how it works in more of a personal level. But even just looking at the behavioral agility, when we go back to those DISC challenges, like I had mentioned, it's all about making sure that we are working on ourselves and helping others as well. And again, we started this conversation learning about ourselves, but the real power lies in interacting with others. And I know it's much harder to interact with people that may have completely different behavior to you, but it's all about just being understanding and valuing them for their behaviors. So I know, just a personal example, I have very low steadiness. Like I think the lowest steadiness that you could possibly imagine. So oftentimes I feel like I have a really hard time working with people who have high steadiness because they're so pace-based and procedurally oriented that I get really frustrated because I don't have that patience. So I want to get moving. I want the answers. I'm even snapping right now because I feel myself getting agitated thinking about it. But there are people on my team that have very high steadiness that are fantastic and super integral parts of our team. And with their procedural focus, it almost pegs me down a notch to make sure that I'm crossing my T's, dotting my I's, and not missing any challenges, but they're always there to support me with whatever I need. So by understanding and at least giving them more time to complete a project, if I have a question, allowing them the amount of time that they need to get me the right information, being more patient with them, making sure I'm giving them detail, and asking them questions about themselves, and understanding that they may not get to me as rapidly as I want them to, is a big learning curve. And again, that's where the power lies, because we have to embrace people's differences to again learn and value each other. So I really, if you have any questions about this, Robert, let me know. But I think this is, one of the most powerful parts of what we do with the DISC model. Again, just interacting with others when there are DISC factors, especially people with too high, the image is really funny. I can be the one on the left and you're the one on the right. But when there are individuals that do have disconnects or incompatibility in their behaviors, that's when we'll see those challenges. But that's where we can come together, and someone's maybe disconnect could be the potential thing that saves them, right? So again, with my low steadiness and my sometimes lack of following procedure might land me in a hole. But with my teammates that are high steadiness and can help me cover my blind spots and remind me, hey, Camille, I need you to do this before you move on to this project, because then you're going to be missing this piece. That's really helpful for me. So again, it's just how we're going to integrate our behaviors together. And except when it comes to two high dominant people, that's the only time we see a power struggle, because they both want to be chiefs and not Indians. That's the point where we usually find the most or the least amount of compatibility. I guess it's not a problem with you and your wife, right? That's the only kind of tidbit I would say to keep an eye out for, but I think it just comes down to some tips and tricks for interacting, or is just be an active listener. Don't try to just talk. You learn more when you're silent than you are when you're speaking. So just try to make sure that you're understanding those differences and valuing others, and be respectful and open and communicate. Communication is definitely key. Now, I don't know about you, or I'll probably ask you in a second, but I will speak for myself in saying that this transition through COVID-19, not just work related, but personally, has definitely been a challenge. And just the transition from working in an office environment to work from home or work remote definitely came with a learning curve for myself. But when I get time to break down my behavioral style and what I needed in an office environment to be able to adjust it to different preferences of things that I need in a work from home environment or a remote environment, it's going to help me feel more engaged. It's going to help me feel more focused, more comfortable through these very weird and unprecedented times. I mean, it's very, very different for a lot of people. And even just thinking about making the change for myself and what we've learned with those different behavioral styles, there are some recommendations that I would encourage people take into consideration when you're looking at how you at home can focus on managing this crisis for yourself. So I recommend, first and foremost, is just to focus on your communication style. It's one of the most important. So ask yourself, how has your communication style changed right now? You know, by understanding your preference in communication, it's going to help you understand how to better communicate with those other people. So what do you feel like you're lacking right now? Or what do you feel that you aren't doing for the other people on your team, right? And now that you're working remotely or working from home, how, by reflecting on that change in your communication style, what are you going to do to readjust and support yourself and the people around you best? So what about you, Robert? What do you think? Like, how do you feel that your communication style has changed now that you are working from home?
You know, from the obvious changes being we're no longer in an office together. So I can no longer walk over to any of my teammates and just ask a question or, bounce an idea off of them. There's a step in between, whether it's a call or an email, something that, is slows the process down. I find that I've actually moved a little bit away from email for myself. So where I like to put a lot of things in writing and just have a nice communication chain for myself. While I'm still doing that, I also find that I like to pick up the phone and call my executive director and just kind of have a chat and a touch base where I normally wouldn't have, because maybe I've seen her throughout the day 5-6 times, so I don't need to talk to her for 20, 30 minutes at a time. Now I find myself, let me just, pick the phone up and give a quick call and kind of check in. So, it's been an interesting little change there.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, just even thinking about my behaviors, I'm someone who likes the big picture, right? And I do, with my high influence, I love to talk to people. So even just separating myself from an office environment and being alone at home for a majority of the day is really challenging. So I have found myself actually picking up the phone, texting people, calling people, wanting to join more video chats, even if it's just a checkup with my managers, with my team, with my peers, just to make sure that I'm staying kind of sane. Because you don't have that regular interaction. I don't get to lean into the office next door and say, hey, you want to grab lunch? You can't even go out and grab lunch right now. So I'm glad that at least I'm not the only one. But again, just focusing based on your communication style. For people who are dominant like myself and want the big picture, making sure that if you are providing those people with the detail for what needs to get done, it's going to help them feel less uncertain. With people with high influence, actually taking the time out of your day to do regular checkups with them and allow them the time to talk through their projects or just talk to you about whatever's going on during their day, it's going to be also really fantastic. With people with high steadiness, as far as communication goes, making sure that you are setting up a procedural plan or almost a rigor to, so, helping them map out their day is going to give them more certainty and more stability during their day, because they have something to follow, right? And then even with people with high compliance, with the fact that we are changing so many of our policies right now, and the fact that we're changing our procedures, giving them as much detail as possible and helping them formulate this new norm is going to be really helpful when it comes to communication. So give them all the information that you can. Make sure that you're timely, and make sure that you're answering any questions that they may have, because they're going to be craving that information. But past looking at your communication and how it's changed, let's look at challenges for you at home. Like what hits most for you? And I guess I'll let you answer that question first, Robert.
It's the inability to really set a plan ahead of time right now is probably the biggest challenge that I'm seeing. That's really striking me. So I am a fundraiser, and a lot of what I do is putting together strategies for how I want to raise money, who I want to look at, what kind of companies might be the best to reach. And events are all rescheduled. Companies are changing how they're giving right now. Individuals are giving, but on a much more grassroots basis, which is great, but it's, everything is shifting. And so that is one of the biggest challenges that I've really seen is looking ahead now. I have to get creative in essentially predicting, what do I think things are going to look like? How do I think a ask is going to go? Or, what do I think the priorities are going to be coming out of this and people's situations? So that is a big challenge. That's a big, very specific professional challenge. But, a personal challenge from working at home is I have 2 cats and a 7-year-old, and they are home with me. And right before the webinar started with Camille, my cat was over here and she just knocked over my tree. So I have a big pile of dirt I have to clean up, and those things are not things I have to worry about at work. I can just plug away and do a webinar or anything I want without having to worry about any sort of interruption. But, it's, little things, big things. It's just these challenges that we're running into that we have to really make quick adjustments for, that are the most interesting.
Yeah, I have it's funny you mentioned your cats and a 7-year-old. I have a puppy who gets into a ton of trouble, and right now, thank the Lord, he's sleeping. I don't think he's slept for this long at all today, so I that's some sort of a gift. So thank God he's not like running around. But even just like personal challenges for me, like I feel like I definitely enjoyed getting up in the morning and getting ready for work and going into work and dressing professionally. I mean, like, everyone who's watching this, I dressed up for you today. I put makeup on for the first time, and I tried. I mean, like, I tried to look pretty. Like, this is it, folks. But I made an effort today, and I haven't done that for like a month and a half because I didn't feel like there was really a need to. But it just kind of makes you think, like, our lives have been kind of like turned upside down with all of this, and it has been a challenge. Just again, sitting at home by myself, not being able to do everything that all the activities I was really active in, meeting with my Meta Broward team, planning new projects. It's, the uncertainty of not being able to plan something out in a couple of months or not know when you're going to see your friends next, or isolating from your parents, things like that have been a really big challenge for me. So I think it's really important, again, stemming back to making sure that you're communicating right, asking yourself, what's challenging you right now? Like, how are you feeling frustrated? Why do you feel disempowered right now? Are you finding yourself that you are becoming bored quickly? Or do you feel like you're lacking lines and clarity? Or do you feel anxious about the fact that you are adapting to change really quickly? And again, these all stem from your behaviors. So ask yourself these questions and really think about, like, what is the root of what's causing me this frustration or this anxiety? And based on what I know about myself, how can I help combat that? So with that, I say it's really important to at least make a plan and bring some sort of normalcy back into your day-to-day. So use what you know is not working for you, and to help engage in conversations with yourself, first and foremost, with your managers, with your team, and try to bounce ideas off each other on how you're going to adapt in this situation. Ask questions like, what do you need from me to deliver results? Allow for those face-to-face conversations. Verbalize your thoughts on projects. And communication is going to be a really big key in getting ourselves in each other out of this hole that we find ourselves in right now. So make sure if you need something, ask for it. If you need details, ask for it in advance. This is all just going to help you at least to find a plan to make sure that you're providing support to yourself and you're providing support to others. So whatever that plan may look like for you, just try to stick with it. And at the end, through all of this, I think it's really important to focus on the fact that I said it before, like, we are complex human beings, but be human. We're all going to need different things from different people, and we're all facing our own challenges, whether that be personal or work related, when we're facing this new reality. So when it comes down to managing your behavior right now in your current work environment, or even just managing your behavior, if you're looking at a job transition right now, think about what you need, think about what makes yourself great, and be human about it and really embrace it. So with that, I mean, I just want to give a huge thank you to everyone who's listening to this webinar. I would love to hear your feedback on what you found was the most noteworthy, like what did you take out of this session? And also, what do you think your key action is going to be when you work on this next opportunity or your current work environment? I'd love to know, so please share. Again, thank you so much. My name was Camille Camacho. I'm going to hand it back over to Robert. Robert, thank you for having me again. And I hope you guys all show up for our next webinar.
Great. Thank you so much, Camille. You did a phenomenal job. I really appreciate you sharing some of the information that Thomas International uses. And I actually thought of a question from before when you were talking about the behavioral adjustments. In doing the DISC assessment with Thomas International and identifying your different behaviors, I know that in every job I've had coworkers who I get along really well with, and others who I have to try a little harder to communicate properly. That's something, you gave us some hints and ideas on how to adjust that. But if we were to go into with Thomas International, would you give us kind of an outline of some, like a plan essentially of how to improve communication between, behaviors in an office?
Oh, absolutely. We even have, I can see if I can provide, if anyone is interested, I can provide what we call communication do's and don'ts. So for each of the behaviors that we have, there are things that we like and things that we really dislike when it comes down to communication. I know that a few of our clients, once they've actually used the DISC and figure out specifically what behaviors they exhibit and which are their more foundational behaviors, they actually cut out this square and they write down, hey, I hate emails, please call me, or hey, I love emails, do not call me, I do not want to hear from you during the day. So if you have anyone specifically in mind or a type of behavior that you feel like you're not collaborating with the most when it comes down to communication, I'd love to take that up with you offline. There are definitely behavioral communication cues that people like and dislike. So I'll just give you one, for example. With people with high influence, I really dislike when someone comes into a conversation with me and they don't ask me how I'm doing. So if they just come up to me and say, I need this, it's like, oh, well, excuse you, like, I'm great. It's my birthday. Tell me happy birthday first, talk about my new haircut, and then I'll give you exactly what you need, right? So people with high influence really don't appreciate engaging in conversation without actually having banter, right? So if you are going to send a person with high influence an email, say, hey, Camille, how are you? How's your puppy doing? He must be getting pretty old. Hey, can you send me XYZ Excel? That'd be great, thanks. Like that for me would do a lot more than someone just kind of barking something out. Or someone with compliance. I have a problem with this because I don't give enough details sometimes in my emails. So I know when I'm communicating with someone who has a high compliance, I need to make sure that I try to cross my T's and dot my I's as much as I can on that email so that they get the most information and detail that they need to feel like sufficed with the next task in hand. So oftentimes people don't like when emails are too blunt or broad. So people with high compliance are going to look for detail, and you'll probably find with people with high compliance, if you're not giving them enough detail, you're going to get like 2-3 emails back asking a lot of questions, right? Which is also kind of like a waste of time and money and resources because you guys are both emailing each other back and forth. So just things like that, being cognizant of other people's behaviors and having these communication do's and don'ts, which I'll see if we can provide as an extra resource, is going to be really helpful in making sure that you're capitalizing on those communications and maximizing the potential of yourself at work and of others as well. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, that was just that.
Okay.
I wanted to hear a little bit more about how Thomas International provided that in a general sense for folks. I think that's a big thing that a lot of companies run into. I mean, the larger you are, of course, the more personalities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, this has been incredible, Camille. Thank you so much for putting this all together and giving us your time to do the webinar and record it and be here with us today. We will be posting this on the Broward Public Library Foundation social media soon. I imagine that's probably where you found it. For those of you who are interested in more webinars as they come out, be sure to follow us on YouTube. You can find us at Broward Public Library Foundation. We have a webinar that's already up right now. It's called Combating the Financial Effects of COVID-19, recorded by our Director of Chair of Education, Jeffrey Alejo. He did a phenomenal job on that. And then we should have a couple more coming out soon. We want to do one over exploring the library's e-resources, which there's just a wealth of them, all for free. You can access from home, get a digital library card in an instant. It's incredible. And a really cool one, home office organization tips and tricks. So we're gonna get an expert on to do a webinar on how do you create a home workspace that's really efficient and works well for you. It might actually go really nice hand in hand with this DISC assessment I'm thinking about now, because you can get assessed first on how you like to work and then apply the tips and tricks to best fit your personality.
I'm definitely going to be tuning in for that one, and not just because I'm part of the team. I actually would love that. Now that we're all working from home, we got to reorganize. I know I'm working from my kitchen right now. I need to find myself an office space, but it is what it is.
It's wherever we can find a nice table spot to put our computer.
Exactly.
On. So well, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you so much for listening. You can reach Camille at ccamacho@thomasus.com and learn more about Thomas International at thomas.co. Sounds like a really incredible organization. And keep an eye out for the Meta Broward Reading Challenge that should be popping around your social media soon. It's a really fun little thing we're doing with the committee. So thank you all very much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.